Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who started wearing his hat like a douchebag. What do you think, huh? This isn't me. I'm not cool enough to pull this off. To do this, you have to laugh with your tongue hanging out. And I just have none of that in me. There's nothing there. Plus, I'm already dressed like a Hollywood cocksucker or Hugh Hefner or something, so we'll just keep it at that. Anyway, I am here to talk about Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov, who's also known as Nasruddin Imavov, UFC Fight Night, whatever the fuck. I'll look it up between here and the first fight that I'll be breaking down. But pretty pumped for this card. These Saudi Arabia cards, while they aren't pay-per-view stacked, they're Fight Night stacked. And this one's going to be a pretty damn good event, regardless of how the fights turn out. Okay, opening up UFC Fight Night 250. I told you. Is Jamal Pogues versus Hamdy Abdelwahab. My prediction for this fight is Hamdy wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And I have no confidence in that prediction whatsoever. Maybe a little more confidence in the decision part, to be honest. But I am picking Hamdy because, first of all, you've got a gun to my head forcing me to make a prediction. But secondly, because I think there's a little more upside with Hamdy Abdelwahab. It wouldn't surprise me if he makes a solid, formidable UFC heavyweight. But there's just too many questions surrounding him for me to ever really trust him. So even though the odds are razor thin here, which usually would mean if you have a pick, you bet on it. But I'm staying away from this one because I don't have any strong convictions in this fight. Hamdy, he is a wrestler. He's young and he's built like a fucking tank. He's definitely got things going for him as a heavyweight. And also, so far, despite only being 5-0, he's answered every question he's needed to answer. He's shown some traits. The thing is, he's only shown them once or twice. Not enough for me to really know who he is as a fighter. I want to see him in more competitive fights when shit goes wrong. But so far, he's done his job. He's steamrolled everybody but Dontel Mays as a pro. Dontel Mays would have been his one decision victory, but the fight was overturned, which I'll get to in a second. But I want to talk about that fight, and that's really the reason why I'm picking him to win. He showed a lot in that fight. Came out on fire, but then Dontel Mays took over the fight, started really taking it to him in the middle there. And first of all, that put his chin to the test. He had a flying knee and some other big shots, and I think he's got a solid chin on him. There's no real doubt there. But secondly, having the chin only gave him a shot at battling his way back into round 3, where they were even going into round 3, and that's what he did. He was on fumes, I'm sure, running near exhaustion, but he was able to take big 6'7", whatever he is, Dontel Mays down and crowd him for the majority of round 3. And it still wasn't the most definitive victory. Dontel battled back and was taking it to him, and you could argue it was a bad decision or whatever. But no doubt he won that fight with that third round effort. And I think most fighters that are 4-0 or 5-0, whatever he was, that are fighting a guy with a much deeper resume, a lot more experience, and UFC level shit, I think if they win round 1 and lose round 2 to that guy, the more experienced fighter, is running away with round 3 10 out of 11 times. But Hamdy was able to get back in his face and do enough in round 3, scratching and clawing, where ultimately he won a decision. Although, again, ultimately it was overturned because he tested positive for whatever the fuck, and then yada, yada, yada. It all just adds more questions and more doubt to Hamdy. I mean, I'd have enough doubt if that Dontel Mays fight wasn't overturned and if it took place 6 months ago. You'd hear me say, I don't really know this guy as a fighter. But now his best victory is overturned, and we haven't seen him in 2.5, 3 years. And of course, you got to wonder, what the fucking steroids were doing to him anyway. So there's too many questions for me to trust anything with Hamdy. But I'll say this: he's looked good enough so far where I'll pick him to beat Jamal Pogues. He was tested once that I saw as an amateur, where he actually did lose, but it was a disqualification. He ended up hitting the guy behind the head or whatever, but he came back and took over that fight and was going to TKO that guy who was exhausted. But before he was exhausted, that guy Corey or Connor or whatever was able to get the better of him on the feet, cleanly outstriking him, being the longer, taller guy, and even took him down. I think Hamdy threw a kick and whatever, he caught a kick or whatever. But yeah, definitely was a little bit of adversity there, which was a good look because, again, he took over immediately in round 2 and got the guy out of there before getting disqualified, I guess. And then there was this other fight that he fought on the amateur scene against this guy, Greg Velasco, who's a few rungs below the UFC. And that went to a split decision. I wasn't able to see that. If you know where I can find it, fucking let me know. But yeah, everything I've seen from Hamdy Abdelwahab has shown promise. And Jamal Pogues, he's a guy who's got an 11-4 record. 3 of his 4 losses take place on the ground, down the stretch, and to light heavyweights. And they're all excellent fucking fighters, by the way, or they were anyway. But that was him as a light heavyweight. He was submitted twice and TKO'd once on the ground again. It wasn't on the feet. But since moving up to heavyweight, first of all, he's made a solid transition. The guy's fucking gigantic. He's put on the weight well. He wears it well. But he's also been beat. He's only been beaten once at heavyweight, and it was to Mick Parkin in the exact opposite type of fight that he lost from those other ones that he lost, where this one was purely on the feet, and he just couldn't get through on Mick. Mick was too fast and kept him at bay for the whole fight. That could happen here, but I don't think so. I don't think Hamdy is that comfortable of a striker. I think he's got some tricks on the feet and some good wrestler pop in his punches. But I do think if he's not taking down Jamal Pogues gets the better of him. Jamal Pogues isn't going to be giving him his legs either. The guy's not a big leg kicker at all. He's going to be keeping his legs underneath him and making it more difficult for Hamdy to reach him. I do think Jamal will have success in this fight, and he could totally take over. But I'm picking Hamdy to win because I think Hamdy is faster, and I think Jamal Pogues will give him those openings to crowd him and take him down. No real strong feelings on this one, just a slight lean towards Hamdy Abdelwahab because he's got better, overall better skill set with the wrestling. And there's no real definitive weakness in him. He's shown a chin when he's needed to show it. He's shown cardio when he's needed to show it. And I give him a slight edge to beat Jamal Pogues. Next up, we have Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. My prediction for this fight is Lucas Alexander wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I think he's the sharper striker. I think he's the sharper striker with the sharper leg kicks. And I know he's got 3 inches of height and 3 inches of reach to complement this potential advantage that I've conjured up in my head for some reason. But look, Lucas Alexander, I'd give him a slight advantage on the feet, but I would definitely give an advantage on the ground to Bogdan Grad, probably even a bigger advantage. Bogdan Grad's a much better grappler than his record would indicate, but certainly in this matchup, he's the threat. Alexander's never tapped anybody, and he's actually been submitted in 3 of his 4 losses. And Bogdan Grad, while he may not have the athleticism of Joe Anderson Brito, and he may not be able to bulldoze Lucas Alexander, but he's a guy who I think, if he's able to hit takedowns, could methodically work over Lucas on the ground. And if he's not able to hit takedowns, he's still got opportunistic threats like that guillotine, which has been there for him in his pro victories, his pro submission victories. And down the stretch as well. He's gotten a good amount of round 2 finishes in the second half of his career. So Bogdan Grad is definitely a threat in a few different ways for Lucas. Even on the feet, I give the technical advantage to Lucas Alexander, but Bogdan Grad is a fucking tank, probably hits harder, and in general brings more danger with spinning shit and flying shit. And again, these are finishes he's gotten in round 2. So definitely some virtues for Bogdan Grad, but on the other side, there's some negatives. One is that he's been knocked out. Tom Nolan knocked him out. That's the one loss I was able to see. If you know where to see his other loss by decision, fucking let me know, please. I'll check it out. But the one loss to Tom Nolan, it's forgivable because Tom Nolan is still a fucking monster. He's a first round monster, and he did go through Bogdan Grad. But it's the only time he's lost like that, and he's still only 29 years old. So I can't write off his chin. I'll just say, remains to be seen if it's a thing in the future. And for Lucas Alexander, as sure as I am that submission defense is a thing he's going to have to worry about in the future, now he's also got to worry about his chin, or at least I do. He's been knocked out now against Jaka Saragui in his last fight. Jaka, he was getting a little too confident getting up. Lucas Alexander got up and turned around and got met with the perfect punch that he did not expect to be there. Jaka pounced on him and hit him right on the chin as he was getting up, and that was it. He collapsed against the cage and got knocked out. It was a perfect shot. He turned right into it and all the rest of it, but it was still a pretty bad knockout and remains to be seen if it's a thing in the future. Still, without anybody getting a knockout, though, I give a slight edge to Lucas Alexander. I think he's the better guy on the outside. I think he's going to be too tough to catch, too tough to corner in the first place. And I think even though Bogdan Grad has shown a lot of toughness in every other fight but that knockout loss and danger down the stretch, I'm going to trust Lucas Alexander doesn't have a bad chin, and I think he'll be able to outmaneuver Bogdan Grad and get the better of him. I'm picking Lucas to win. I'm picking it to be by decision. I've already bet on him, just a small bet, just to be honest, but I'll wait for everything to drop because I do plan on wasting some money on Bogdan Grad by submission because that's the kind of jerk off I am. But yeah, I'll reach for some props, but really this one, I think it's a tight matchup, and I've placed a small bet on Lucas Alexander as the underdog, and that is my pick. Next up, we have Mayra Bueno Silva taking on Jasmine Jasdovicius. My prediction for this fight is Jasmine wins, and I've got her winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is wrestling and cardio. I think she's going to have a tough first round and then win rounds 2 and 3. Mayra Bueno Silva, of course, is an exceptionally dangerous fighter. Really, I mean, she's dangerous everywhere, but especially on the ground. That's where you're in most danger of getting finished. She's got an armbar from hell. I think she can catch anybody, including Jasmine. And Jasmine's really got to watch out in round 1 when Mayra's firing on all cylinders. Of course, by the way, I should mention, this is exactly the kind of fight where I'll put $1 on draw between Mayra Bueno Silva's strong round 1 and what I think or expect will be Jasmine's strong round 3. Just give me a 10-8 in one of those spots, and there's at least a shot of getting a draw. So yeah, I'll throw $1 on that. But I'm definitely picking Jasmine to win a decision. Jasmine's never been finished. She's been in there with a lot of good fighters, and she's shown that grit, and she's shown that wrestling and the rest of it, where I just trust her to be there at the end of round 1 here, first of all, and then to be the better woman in rounds 2 and 3. Mayra Bueno Silva, she doesn't have horrible cardio, but it's been responsible for a few losses. And here I definitely think she's up against it down the stretch against Jasmine Jasdovicius. Jasmine, she's not likely to get a finish. I mean, we've seen it in the UFC, but you have to be a real fighter with a lot of weaknesses, really known to collapse, I think, for Jasmine to get a finish. And even then, it's almost guaranteed to be down the stretch. But here, Mayra Bueno Silva shouldn't get finished. She's a really tough girl. On the feet, by the way, I think Mayra, especially in round 1 again, is going to be giving Jasmine hell. She's really sharp. Mayra Bueno Silva, she's ferocious, and I think she'll have something for her early. But there's no real knockout chance here for either fighter. I think it's just points to be scored. And I think in the end, this is a grappling match. and wrestling is going to be winning that grappling match for the final 10 minutes of this fight. This is one where I might go reaching for some things, draw this and that, the armbar in round one. But my prediction, no doubt, is Jasmine Jasdovicius winning this fight by decision. I'll wait to see how to play that. It might be Jasmine by decision. Might be Mayra Buena Silva at plus points. Because again, I'd be surprised if Jasmine ran through her and won all 3 rounds if she dominated this fight. I'll see how to play it, but that's definitely the fight I expect. A close decision that goes Jasmine's way, and in general, she does better in the second half of this fight. Next up, we have Mike Davis versus Fares Ziam. My prediction for this fight is Davis wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I always thought he was a really good fucking fighter, even though he fights every year and a half, and it's tough to tell. But he still looked as good as he's ever looked in his last fight, a win over Natan Levy, where he got his second submission of his career. And he gets it over that guy with an arm triangle choke in round 2. That was a great look for him. His stock definitely went way up, even though it went back down due to inactivity again. But for Ziam, he looked as good as he's ever looked in his last fight, getting his first UFC finish by knocking Matt Frevola dead in round 3. And of course, even if he didn't get the knockout, he was comfortably winning that fight anyway. But here, I'm picking Davis to win because Davis doesn't have a bad chin like Matt Frevola does. Mike Davis is very fucking tough. He's only got 2 losses. One is a rear naked choke to Gilbert Burns. It's a little forgivable. And he took that fight on very short notice, by the way. And the other one was on the Contender Series, probably in like the first season or the second season, where Sadiq Youssef beat him by decision. And that was an incredible fight. Those guys threw down for 15 minutes. Sadiq hits really fucking hard, and Davis was able to stand up to him and give some back and gave us one hell of a war. So those are very 2 forgivable losses. And inside the UFC, of course, after his debut loss to Gilbert Burns, he's been on a 4-fight winning streak. The problem is that these 4 fights span over the course of like 5 years. Again, because he's very inactive. So it's tough to tell how much better he's getting. But he's gotten a nice knockout, he's gotten a nice submission, and he's gotten 2 great decision wins over Mason Jones and maybe not the greatest, but a wrestling victory over Slavakos, which Slava could have given him a lot of trouble if Mike Davis wasn't as well-rounded as he is. But he was well-rounded enough to make that an easy night at the office. So I'm picking Mike Davis because I do think he's physically stronger than Fares Ziam and could bully him on the inside. And on the outside, even though he's fighting a taller, longer guy, Fares Ziam, I still think Mike Davis has an excellent chin on him and hits really fucking hard. I think he hits harder than Fares, where he could turn the fight with some power. Neither guy's been knocked out, although Fares Ziam could have been TKO'd in the Luigi Vendramini fight in round 3. He definitely slipped in round 3 there and almost let that fight slip away. But I think Mike Davis, even though he hasn't been tested as much as Fares Ziam, who's gotten a wealth of experience since Mike Davis had his last, 2 fights, I still think Mike Davis is in his prime at 32 years old. He's a really well-rounded guy with a lot of great traits, and I'm picking him to win this fight. I think he can slow down Fares Ziam with his physicality and strength on the inside. And on the outside, I don't think Fares Ziam can find the same advantages he does against other fighters. I think he's going to be at a speed disadvantage against Mike Davis and a power disadvantage. So making the most of his traits isn't going to be so easy. And I've got Davis winning this fight. I'd love to see him get a finish, but I'll pick him to win by decision. Of course, I should have mentioned Fares Ziam's got 4 losses. 1 is by decision. The other 3 are first-round rear naked chokes. Mike Davis may not be Mr. Rear Naked Choke, but sometimes the loss is all about the losing fighter's traits. So maybe there's something there where Davis is able to get his 3rd submission victory and 2 in a row after looking like a guy who would never get another submission win again. But regardless, I'm going with Davis here. And the pick is he wins by decision. The odds have tightened now, so I have bet on Mike Davis. He was a bigger favorite, and I wasn't thinking about it. But yeah, now I'm taking a stab on Mike Davis. Next up, we have Terrence McKinney versus Damir Hadzovic. My prediction for this fight is McKinney wins by round one rear naked choke, and my bets will be going every which fucking way. It's a Terrence McKinney fight. I love Terrence McKinney fights, and I'll always play every one of them both ways. The pick is McKinney. I think he wins by round one rear naked choke. If I'm wrong, my second pick is McKinney, and I think he wins by knockout in 25 seconds. But of course, the third pick is Terrence McKinney can't close the show in round one, and he collapses and gets TKO'd by Damir Hadzovic in round two, and in the first half of round two. Because McKinney, who's got 22 professional fights, 21 of them take place in under a round and a half. The under a round and a half would have hit in 21 of his 22 fights. And that's wins and losses. The only fight in which he went outside of over a round and a half was some third round submission that he had years ago, which I can't even fucking fathom. I'm baffled just reading it on paper. But apparently it happened, and that's the one time that the under wouldn't have hit in a Terrence McKinney fight. And these losses, they're bad losses too. He's been TKO'd 5 times. Once was an injury, but then he was knocked out the other 4 times. Badly knocked out too. He's got a horrible chin on him. And of course, he was submitted twice as well. Darrick Minner, who may have been a cheating scumbag, but Darrick Minner was an incredible submission artist, and he was able to triangle Terrence McKinney early. And Nazim Sadikov was able to get him out of there with a rear naked choke in round 2. Again, another collapse from Terrence McKinney. So Damir Hadzovic, even though he's now 39 years old, 38 years old, and he hasn't fought in 3 years or 4 years or whatever the fuck, and anything else you want to put on the negative side for Damir Hadzovic, I still see it as the same play for any Terrence McKinney fight. An early victory or a devastating defeat. Probably in round 2, but of course, it could come in round 1 as well. And that's how I will play this one. Damir Hadzovic, he's got a record of 14-7. It's very similar to McKinney's record. But he's historically been very durable. He was knocked out once by Mairbek Taisimov with a beautiful uppercut. And Taisimov, if you don't know, he was one of the best prospects inside the UFC at that moment. And even though, whatever, a little overrated perhaps or whatever. But anyway, and he was submitted once, Damir Hadzovic. And it was a round 1 rear naked choke to another rear naked choke monster in Renato Moicano. Just like Terrence McKinney, he's a monster on your back, but Moicano is a little bit better for sure than Terrence McKinney. Still, Hadzovic was probably 34 or whatever when that happened. Here he's 38, probably physically compromised, all these negative strikes going against him. And I do think Terrence McKinney will be able to get in on his hips very easily and rip him to the mat. And he's probably going to be looking to do so because even though Terrence loves a knockout victory, he's suffered a lot of knockout defeats, and they're adding up to the point where he can't have any faith in his own chin. I mean, he just can't. So I'm thinking he's going to be shooting in on Hadzovic and dominating him and getting him out of there early. Hadzovic, his other 5 losses are by decision. A good amount of them have been in the UFC. Alan Patrick, Christos Yagos, Mark Giacchese. Some of these guys aren't even grapplers, but they were all grapplers and wrestlers against him. He's a guy who can be out-wrestled. Historically, that's been a major weakness of his, and certainly here, at his age and the rest of it, it's a weakness against McKinney. So he's getting taken down early, I would think, and it's up to him to survive. He's got to keep that guard closed and not try to escape. He's let all these guys, Alan Patrick and Yagos and Giacchese, all these guys take his back. They were able to put hooks in and dominate him. The only guy to get him out of there was Renato Moicano, but Terrence McKinney, especially in round 1, he's much more dangerous on the ground than all those guys. maybe not like Yagos, but he's very fucking dangerous. In round one, he's just a fucking killer. So I'm taking him to kill Hadzovic, and I will look to bet on that. I'll look to bet on the under as well, although I doubt it'll be worth it. And of course, I will look to waste money on Hadzovic getting a finish because I have to. Next up, we have Abdul Karim Al Sawadi taking on Balaji Oki. My prediction for this fight is Oki wins, and I've got him winning by knockout in round one, I guess. I don't know. The basis for the prediction is that I think Oki is dangerous and a really good athlete. And also, Abdul Karim Al Sawadi, I have no faith in his chin. I had no faith in his chin really coming into the UFC. I was very skeptical anyway. And then even though he was taking it to Louis Grajabov and perhaps on his way to winning a decision, in round three, his chin came back to haunt him for the first time in years. But he was knocked out again. He's got 4 losses, all of which are by knockout or TKO. And it stands to reason that's what the 5th one will look like as well. And that's what I'm picking here with Balaji Oki. Oki doesn't have a wealth of experience. And certainly the way he looked in his last fight, losing to Chris Duncan like that, just letting himself get trapped in a guillotine that I thought was avoidable. I don't think he's a perfect fighter, and I think he's got a lot of holes in his game that he's probably still trying to patch up. But despite that, I think he's a really difficult guy to wrangle and control in the first place. Again, he's a really sharp athlete. And I also think he's a really sharp striker. I think Abdul Karim Al Sawadi's going to have a hard time catching him and catching up with him in the first place. And I think Balaji Oki is going to be catching him with his strikes. Oki's put some good guys away. He's had some nice body shot finishes lately. But even though he doesn't have maybe the Dan Henderson knockouts on his highlight reel, you can still see the visible power in Balaji Oki striking. And I think he's going to catch Abdul Karim Al Sawadi. Or maybe he won't have to touch his chin. Maybe he'll just go through his body. But either way, I think Oki still has a lot of promise. And I have to say, getting guillotined by Chris Duncan, I didn't see that coming. So I can't say it would totally surprise me if he got guillotined by Abdul Karim Al Sawadi. But much like Duncan, he's not as likely to exploit the ground game of Balaji Oki. And I'm sure Oki's been working on his submission defense. Again, that was an avoidable submission for him. But on the feet, Abdul Karim Al Sawadi can bring it there as well. But again, Balaji Oki, I think he's got a solid chin on him. And I know Abdul Karim Al Sawadi doesn't. So he would have to, survive for 15 minutes, keeping himself safe and outpointing Balaji Oki, who's going to be a tough guy to reach early in the first place. So I've got Balaji Oki winning. I think he's got too much firepower. I think he's going to level up here and get a nice highlight reel knockout on the chin, perhaps. But yeah, Oki, round one is the pick. And I have bet on him. And I will wait to see what all the other shit looks like. Next up, we have Shamil Gaziev versus Thomas Petersen. My prediction for this fight is Shamil Gaziev wins. And I've got him winning by round 3 TKO for some reason. I don't know. But I do think he's the better fighter here. I think Thomas Petersen, if he's able to take down Shamil Gaziev, he can make this a very interesting fight. But I'm picking Gaziev to be able to keep this standing. And on the feet, even though Petersen's got tricks up his sleeve, and he's definitely not completely lost, I think he's definitely at a disadvantage against Shamil Gaziev. Gaziev is just, he brings it. He's much more comfortable on the feet. He's more dangerous, really brings that pressure. And it doesn't seem like he's a guy who worries about getting taken down. Here it might be different if Petersen's able to put some fear into him there. But otherwise, I do think Shamil Gaziev's going to be the one advancing and in seek and destroy mode. And I eventually see him destroying Thomas Petersen. Gaziev's got 1 loss, and it's a round 4 TKO to Jairzinho Rosenstruck. It's between rounds, so it's not like he was knocked out. But he was gassed, and he was done after 1 round. He had a really good round in him, and then Jairzinho Rosenstruck took over, him being the 5-round main eventer, He was the one with the experience, and he completely took over. I mean, he would have won a 3-round decision anyway, but Gaziev had nothing left in those championship rounds. Thomas Petersen, he's got 2 losses. One is a decision loss against Jamal Pogues a year ago, whatever. And that was a fight where he was a step and a half behind for the first half of the fight and then turned it on in the end in round 3, but it was too little too late. Against Waldo Cortez Acosta, that's the other guy that beat him. That was for the LFA championship. Petersen was doing really well in that fight, but then Waldo Cortez Acosta knocked him out in round 3. Cortez Acosta, who's a boxer, unless he's fighting Rebellis to Spain, and then he's a grappler. But he was a boxer. He had a distinct advantage with his punches there. Petersen was able to take him down and even crowd him in the clinch, and he did some good work, but he wasn't able to keep it up. And in round 3, he slowed down, slipped, collapsed, and got knocked out by Waldo Cortez Acosta. And here, I think he's going to have to take down Shamil Gaziev. I envision Shamil Gaziev being too much for him and trying to advance and bully him on the feet. ESPN, see? But I still think Petersen, he's while he's not lost completely on the feet, he's at a significant disadvantage, and I think he's going to need wrestling to win him this fight. Not even to score the points, but to slow down the advancing of Shamil Gaziev. He can do that. Petersen, he's a beast of a wrestler. He's taken down everybody he's fought in the octagon, and probably everybody outside the octagon as well. But he's up against a better class of fighter here. Shamil Gaziev, even though he's not Mr. Grappler or whatever, I don't think he's going to be the easiest guy to dominate. And I think he's going to be a really hard guy to control in the first place. I envision him getting up and making it difficult if Petersen's able to get him to the ground. And again, on the feet, things can change with some takedowns, but I've got Gaziev being better, and I've got him closing the gap over time and eventually putting Thomas Petersen away. Maybe like the Waldo Cortez Acosta fight, but I don't envision a comeback in my head. I think Gaziev will be leading the dance. Petersen will be a half step behind, and in the end, it'll be too much for him. He's too big of a favorite for me, almost 4-1, so I'm not betting on it. Maybe I'd look at the over-under or something, but in general, staying away from this. Next up, we have Muhammadjon Naimov versus Genghis Khan Ofli. My prediction for this fight is Muhammadjon Naimov wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that he's earned my trust with some more valuable victories, especially Nathaniel Wood. And also, I do think he's the stronger guy, and he wins that whole physicality battle inside the octagon. Having said that, the last time we saw him inside the octagon, I think I said the same shit about him and his opponent, Felipe Lima, and he was doing well up until round 3, where Felipe Lima bulldozed him, took his back, and strangled him, all within like 10 seconds. And while it was quick, and it did kind of look like Felipe Lima took that victory from him, I still have to attribute at least part of that to cardio, because that's always been Muhammadjon Naimov's primary weakness, as far as I'm concerned, his cardio. He's slowed down in victory and defeat. I mean, he's only got 14 fights. It's not like he's got dog shit cardio where he's going to fall apart like Makwan Amirkhani or something, but it's a thing, and moving forward, I think it'll be responsible for the majority of his losses. This is my way of saying bet on Khan Ofli by round 3 submission. Actually, might be worth taking a shot at that. But still, I do think Muhammadjon Naimov wins this fight. I think he's able to bully Khan Ofli, stop him from getting advantageous positions on him, and also bust him up with that extra bit of power he has. Khan Ofli might be the sharper technical striker, but he is not too sharp. He's not that fast. And I don't think he's going to be having such a big speed advantage against Muhammadjon Naimov. I think Muhammadjon Naimov hits harder. I think he can bully him around physically. And I think over the course of 15 minutes, he gets the better of him points-wise. Khan Ofli was knocked out for the first time, just like Naimov was submitted for the first time and finished for the first time in his last loss. Same goes for Ofli, but he was knocked out. He was knocked out by Myron Santos in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter, which, by the way, Khan's got 2 victories over the guy he guillotined, I forget his name, and Nathan Fletcher, who's in the UFC and already got a nice victory. And he beat him by tight decision, but he still beat him. And then he went to the finale and lost by knockout to Myron Santos, who's a big fucking problem. So, not saying he's got a weak chin, but I'm not saying he doesn't either. So, remains to be seen. But other than that, he's got 2 losses, and they're both by decision. And they're 2 guys on the Aussie regional scene, in that corner of the world anyway. And these guys were both undefeated fighters. They retired with 9-0 and 8-0 records. So there's at least a chance that they were the greatest fucking fighters who ever lived. And you can dismiss those losses. But still, with the recent loss to Myron Santos and with Muhammadjan Naimov has showed me the power coming into play against Jamie Malarkey in a fight that was close, and also the victory over Nathaniel Wood. Even if he slowed down in that fight, he still beat Nathaniel Wood in his second fight, and that to me was an upset and definitely earned my respect. So I'm going with Muhammadjan Naimov. I'll take him winning by decision. I've said this like 17 times by now. But again, he's got weak cardio. So when he loses, that'll be responsible for his loss. Up next, we have Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. My prediction for this fight is Saeed Nurmagomedov wins, and I've got him winning by submission for some stupid fucking reason. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you plug in their records. In fact, it makes no sense. But I guess I just think Saeed is incredibly dangerous with those opportunistic subs. And I'm picking him to win like that. What do you want from me? But Vinicius Oliveira, look, he's got 3 losses. All 3 of them are knockouts. One of them was a doctor stoppage against Christian Quinones, but he was still roughed up there. But the others, anyway, are knockouts. And Saeed, I don't think, has that kind of stopping power in his hands. Of course, it can happen, but generally, he's not that type of guy. And on that front, this is a winnable matchup for Vinicius Oliveira. If he can make this about purely on the feet, who's marching who down and landing the harder kicks especially, that's Vinicius Oliveira's fight. I think he throws the harder strikes. Punch for punch and kick for kick. And cunt, or whatever I just said a second ago there. But I still think his primary path to victory, despite him being so dangerous, is a decision, Vinicius Oliveira. He's got most of his wins being knockout. I think 16 of them in his 21 wins. The guy's a killer. And yeah, he's definitely got the power to knock out Saeed or anyone else, probably even heavyweights. But I would think if he does win, it's by decision. And it is marching Saeed down, and it's chopping him down with the harder strikes over the course of 15 minutes. So, despite my play being Saeed Nurmagomedov, I will look for Vinicius Oliveira by decision as well, which is a very stupid hedge. Because, again, you look at his record, he's got like 3 decision victories. Happened to be against Ricky Simon in his last one. Simon's another tough son of a bitch, more proven to be tough. But still, Saeed has never been knocked out or hurt too badly. And I think he's got a lot of great traits as a fighter. And I think if he loses his next one, no matter who it's against, it's a decision. Saeed has lost 3 times himself. All 3 are by decision. He lost to Jonathan Martinez, heavy leg kicker. That was a very close decision, to say the least, though. He should have won that fight. He lost to Raoni Barcelos, who, as we've seen recently, can play the role of a spoiler, and that's what he did there. And he lost to Magomed Bibulatov way back when, who's an excellent fucking fighter. So it's a very high class of fighter that's beaten him, and no one's come close to finishing him. So even though Vinicius Oliveira is incredibly fucking dangerous, I'll take Saeed to survive. And also, it's not like he's going to be standing in a phone booth. He moves very well. Vinicius Oliveira, if he is the win by getting into power range and kicking range, he's going to be having to chase Saeed. And Saeed, of course, is not just going to be running away. He's going to be running into him with strikes as well, and perhaps trying to mix things up with takedowns. Frankly, either guy would benefit from takedowns. But Saeed especially, I think. I know he's the worst wrestler that's ever been named Nurmagomedov. And that's also part of the reason why I think this is a very winnable fight for Vinicius. I was actually looking to bet on Vinicius, by the way. When this fight was announced, I said, yeah, Saeed's going to win. I'll go with Saeed, I guess. But I'm definitely going to root for Vinicius, bet on Vinicius. But then the odds were very tight anyway. I thought he'd be plus two something at a minimum, just from what Saeed has done in the octagon. But instead, the odds are as tight as they are. And that's because I think the betting public, or the odds makers, whoever got these lines going, said that, realized that, who the fuck is texting me? Saeed. I'm taking a dive. All right. Change of plans. No. I do think that this is a close fight stylistically, but I've still got Saeed Nurmagomedov winning this fight. I think he's going to be tough for Vinicius to force his fight on him because he moves so well. I think he's definitely got a chance of clipping Vinicius, uh, mostly with dangerous shit. He is a pretty diverse striker, but also he's got good hands too, and he can come in and clip him with a hook. And also, I think the submission game. He may not need takedowns to impose his submission game, as we've seen with his guillotine chokes and ninja chokes in the UFC. He's beaten a high class of fighter who's most of them haven't been submitted yet, and I think for Vinicius Oliveira, he could definitely be the first guy to submit him as well. And that is my prediction because I am a dumbass. So Saeed Nurmagomedov is the pick. I've got him winning by submission, but really I just think he should win flat. So I've bet on him at minus 190 something. And I will bet on Vinicius Oliveira winning by decision with a few pennies because for some stupid fucking reason, I've convinced myself that's his primary path to victory in this potentially close fight. Next up, we have Sergei Pavlovich versus Jairzinho Rosenstruck. My prediction for this fight is Pavlovich wins, and I've got him winning by knockout in round one, let's say. I do think that's the most likely outcome. I tried to convince myself to pick Jairzinho Rosenstruck to win. Of course, I don't have to convince myself to bet on him. You know I'll do that. I am fucking stupid. But my pick is definitely Pavlovich wins, and it's by round one knockout. I think Sergey, even though he's been knocked out in the last year or two with the Tom Aspinall knockout there, I still think he's probably healthier. And even without that, he is the faster, younger guy, the bigger, stronger guy. And he's also got like 6 inches of reach, which should certainly help him out. Not that I think he's going to be fighting behind the jab, but it'll make it safer for him to go in for the fucking kill. But I do think someone's going to get killed here. And by that, I mean knocked out, of course. If somebody dies, I'm going to feel like shit. I do think if I'm wrong about Sergey winning, the second most likely outcome is Jairzinho Rosenstruck knocking out Sergey Pavlovich. He's got a very deceptive left hand, a tricky left hand. And of course, he's shown he's got that power in the first 10 seconds and in the last 2 seconds of a 5 round fight. Jairzinho Rosenstruck has been able to close the show. And for anybody who's been knocked out ever, and certainly in the last year and a half or whatever, he can get it done. But Pavlovich is my pick to win. It would be interesting to see him try to take this fight to the ground, use some of that wrestling I think I heard about once years ago when he came around. But he's definitely one of those seek and destroy 2 minute fighters. And I think he was forced to fight a different fight against Volkov because of the physical disadvantages. But here, I think he's going to go back to being himself. And of course, with that Volkov fight, it's only been even longer since he's been knocked out. So I'm assuming he's back to his healthy prime and he's going to go try to kill somebody inside 90 seconds. And again, that's my prediction. I'll look for the over under. I'll look for the under, I should say. I doubt it'll be anything juicy, and I'll probably just waste money on Rosenstruck winning by round 3 submission. And in the co-main event of the evening, we have Michael Venom Page taking on Shara Bullet Magomedov. My prediction for this fight is MVP wins, and I've got him winning by decision, even though the crowd may not be backing him up there. So, may not be the wisest prediction, but I'm still going with MVP. I think MVP is going to get what he wants here, and Shara is too, apparently, which is a pure striking fight. And even though I'd say MVP may not be the healthier guy just because he's older and he's been knocked out once, which I'll get to, I still think he's the better striker. I think he's got that spring in his step still, where he moves very well. I think he's really tough to figure out. I don't think Shara's going to be timing too many spinning back shits and double spinning back shits on MVP. And I think MVP will be able to bring the volume down a little bit and outjoust Shara Bullet by being the much faster guy, moving well and darting in. Of course, Shara Bullet has never been beaten. So I don't know what that's going to look like if it happens. In fact, I would think that the best way to beat him is to take the fight to the ground and score some points there. I thought Bruno Silva showed something there. And that's definitely not a path to victory for MVP. So in that sense, you could say, hey, this is a favorable matchup. But I do think it's going to go the other way. I think if these guys are on the feet for 15 minutes, certainly if there are no big moments, which I know is a big if, but I think MVP lands the cleaner strikes and gets the better of them on points. Now, with the bigger shit, yeah, MVP was knocked out. Douglas Lima knocked him out, kicked him in the leg, and then hit him with a beautiful uppercut, I guess. Either way, it's one of the most beautiful knockouts ever. But that's been the only time he's been knocked out. And again, I think he's a hard guy to reach in the first place. Sure, he's going to get hit, but, he moves around very well where he's got that whole first line of defense that most fighters don't have with his movement. And I also think he doesn't have a bad chin. I don't know if it would stand up to any of Shara's pure danger. But I don't think he's going to have to stand up to anything too dangerous, anything spinning. I think he'll be shutting down a lot of Shara's more fancy attacks. Where Shara, while he's trying to figure out MVP, I think he's going to do something more reliable, try out some more reliable strikes. And this will be a little more basic than most Shara Bullet fights or maybe even MVP fights. MVP's got some wild flying shit. Just ask Evangelista Cyborg Santos. He'll tell you all about it. Fucking caved in his skull. But still, here I think MVP would be best served to keep things long and keep things very jousty, make things a point battle, because he's still got that spring in his step. And I think for anybody who wants to give him a pure kickboxing fight, he's the alpha. He's the alpha. I don't know. I felt like I should say that twice. But yeah, MVP is the pick. He's a guy who, I've seen his losses as well. I don't think he's going to be out wrestled here. This isn't Logan Storley, and I think this is an ego fight where Shara isn't going to take any takedowns that present themselves. He's the one that asked for this fight. I still think MVP is healthy enough, despite being only older and closer to 40 at this point. And again, to reiterate, he's got that spring in his step, and I think he's going to be beating Shara to the punch and the kick, hopefully the oblique kick. I've never seen Shara lose, but I'm guessing it's going to happen here without even one fucking takedown. And I've got MVP winning a decision in Saudi Arabia. MVP by decision is the pick. MVP's already been the bet, but of course I'll wait for everything. And we'll see how else I can waste my money. And in the main event, we have Nasruddin Imavov taking on Israel Adesagne. And he loves his lasagna. Sorry. Anyway, I've got Israel Adesanya winning this fight, and it's really just like a hope and a dream. I am predicting he wins, but I'm not too confident in the prediction. And it's mainly because I didn't like the way he looked at the end of the Dricus du Plessis fight. In that fight altogether, I liked the way he looked. I thought he was winning the fight. I thought he was on his way to winning a decision and still looked very sharp. And I guess that's the basis for my prediction here. But the basis for my doubt here is that he got clipped, I think, He got clipped with a shot and started staggering and stumbling, and then ended up getting taken down and submitted. And overall, he just looks more vulnerable after that loss. Not to mention, he's only getting older. He's in his mid 30s. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights, and he's been hurt in all 3 of them. TKO'd by Alex Pereira, knocked down by Sean Strickland, and knocked halfway down by Dricus du Plessis and strangled. So in general, there's some worry creeping in for sure with Israel Adesanya. And I have to say, even though I'm picking him to win, I do think this is a pivotal fight. And if he was to lose this fight, I think he'd probably retire. He could still battle his way back and even beat Imavov or Dricus du Plessis or anybody. He's still incredibly talented, but I do think he's already achieved greatness. And having lost this fight, a non-title fight, I think he would hang up the gloves. Could be wrong. Or maybe he'll go to the GFL and fight fucking Fabio Maldonado or something. I don't know. But anyway, I still do think Israel Adesanya, he may not be in his prime, but he's capable of beating any middleweight on the planet, probably any fighter on the planet. And I'm picking him to beat Imavov here because even though Imavov's looked really tough in both of his 2 losses and really good in all of his wins, and by the way, his 2 losses, I mean the UFC losses against Phil Hawes and Sean Strickland, where Imavov performed well and actually did better than Izzy in that fight against Strickland and took 2 rounds from him, including round 5, which is most important. But still, despite that, I still think Israel Adesanya is a different type of matchup. I don't think he's going to be nearly as hittable as Jared Cannonier was. And I think Israel Adesanya is going to be the one that makes Imavov worry about getting hit. Izzy is still incredibly sharp, and I think he definitely has a speed advantage over Imavov. And I do think Imavov is the better grappler. I think Imavov is going to try to take him down. I think I saw a picture of him. Oh, no, that might have been someone else who had wrestling shoes on, or maybe it was Imavov. But either way, I do expect Imavov to grapple. But to be honest, I think that's only going to slow down his striking for the rest of the fight. I don't think he's going to be able to grapple for 25 minutes. And this is not Edmund Shabazian in Israel Adesanya. He's not just going to fall apart and collapse. Although, again, I don't know what happened in round 4 there, but whatever. So, yeah, I think Imavov will definitely take it to him. We'll give him a good enough battle on the feet and mix it in and take him down and rack up some control points. But I don't think it's going to be enough. And on the feet, I think he's at a distinct disadvantage, and it'll grow more distinct as the fight goes on. And I've got Israel Adesanya winning a decision. Again, with a lot of doubt and apprehension, that is my pick. I would not consider betting heavily on him, but, it's the main event. So depending on how the night goes, I'll probably waste some money. Still, the pick is Israel wins. I've got him winning by decision or whatever the fuck I said. And I really hope he hasn't completely fallen apart here. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.